When judging a celebrity for his or her bad deeds, when should the celebrity's actions bring about the downfall of their artistic works? When should we attempt to mentally divorce the art from the artist? Today, I would like to give you guys my personal take on the matter. What's up guys, Acerthorn here, and the stance that I take on this issue today will heavily influence every video I make from this point forward, so I hope you all take today's video seriously. Before I get started, I want to fully disclaim that it is not my intention to hurt or offend anyone, at least not in today's video. The recent news event that drove me to make this video, if you couldn't tell by the thumbnail, is J.K. Rowling and her recent transphobic comments. Considering that I do a series on this channel called the Harry Potter Retrospective, I feel it is essential that I give you guys the heads up on what my feelings are on the topic and how those feelings will affect the Harry Potter Retrospective and all videos on this channel in the future. What J.K. Rowling has said about transsexuals is absolutely inexcusable. There is no two ways about that. Because of this, a person's ability to enjoy the Harry Potter franchise from this point onward is going to heavily depend on their ability to separate the Harry Potter books and merchandise from the woman who created it all. J.K. Rowling herself is now a certified card-carrying piece of shit. But does that mean that the Harry Potter franchise itself deserves to be forgotten about? Can we still enjoy the art, even if we absolutely hate the artist? Or does the continued consumption of an artistic work effectively justify and provide a platform for the artist to weave their evil ways? I spent more than a few days thinking long and hard about how I want to approach the situation, and after long deliberation with myself, I have come up with a set of rules that I think most of you will agree is fair. First, my default position on the issue is that the art can indeed be separated from the artist, and that the two can indeed be judged independently of each other. If the artist does a bad thing, then, at least by default, that does not make the art itself bad. Now, that does not mean that the artist should be exempt from criticism or reproach because of the bad things he or she does. Rather, I am simply saying that judgment towards the artist should be leveled exclusively at the artist, while the artistic work they have created should be given its own, completely independent criticism. For example, in the video game industry, there is a current scandal going on with Ubisoft, as many past and present employees at Ubisoft are coming forth with damning accusations against the company's upper management for perpetrating, turning a blind eye to, and even actively covering up for a wide assortment of physical and mental abuse against the low-level employees. I do not believe that these allegations should sully our perceptions of any Ubisoft games, past, present, or future. If you enjoy, for example, Assassin's Creed Valhalla, then go ahead and enjoy Assassin's Creed Valhalla. However, I absolutely do not approve of the current scrutiny being applied to Ubisoft's upper management suddenly dissipating once we have a shiny new game to play. We absolutely should keep that up. When I say that the creators and the creation should be judged separately, I do not mean we should have to pick one or the other. We absolutely can judge and criticize both at once. We should just do so separately from one another. Now, that being said, you may have noticed an important word I mentioned a couple of times: default. I do believe there are exceptions and times when the actions or statements of the creator do indeed affect the perception of the creation. Upon long deliberation, I have come up with 3 exceptions that I believe are fair and reasonable. I would like to share them with you right now. The first exception is when the actions, words, or beliefs of the artist directly manifest themselves in the artistic work itself. For example, if a stand-up comedian were to start incorporating racist comments into his stand-up routine, or if there's a game on Steam that's all about shooting gay people for being gay, then we can go ahead and judge the delusional hack right alongside the product he's selling. Now granted, this isn't really an exception since you are still judging the art itself when you do this. That leads me to the next exception, the first one that's truly an exception to this rule, and that is when the evil deeds from the artist directly contribute to making the art itself. For example, when a game developer uses mandatory, abusive crunch to create a game, I feel it is acceptable, and even mandatory, to refer to the crunch when justifying your distaste for the game. Some may believe that this is an unfair exception to the rule of separating art from artist, but I honestly disagree. This is essentially the entertainment equivalent of blood diamonds, and I just cannot bring myself to support a game, or any artistic work, that I know to have been created at the expense of the physical, mental, and psychological well-being of innocent people. Whenever abusive, downright evil business practices are used to make a game or other artistic work, when we buy that game, we are effectively telling the company, this is how you make games that sell millions of copies. Just like when you purchase blood diamonds that are mined using slave labor, purchasing a work of art that was likewise created using similarly dastardly business models is similarly unacceptable. So that leads me to the third and final exception when it comes to separating the art from the artist. And that is when the two are so inextricably intertwined with one another that separation of the two is nigh on impossible. For example, here you can see a stand-up comedy routine. There are no characters in this performance. There are no props. There are no costumes. Hell, there aren't even any sound effects aside from the ones the comedian makes with his own voice. This performance consists entirely of one man simply standing on an empty stage and talking. The performer and the performance are literally one in the same. So if this comedian were to suddenly become involved in a scandal, it would be impossible for me to mentally separate the art from the artist. A similar example, one that I can personally relate to, is the double murder-suicide of Chris Benoit. Now, for those of you who don't follow professional wrestling, he was a great, well-respected wrestler whose reputation went right down the crapper almost overnight when he killed his wife and 7-year-old son and then proceeded to kill himself just so the police couldn't throw him in jail. The crime was so heinous that WWE did the only thing it could do, responded by immediately removing all references to Benoit from their record books, and promising to never mention Benoit's name in any official capacity ever again. Now, some people believe that the art should be considered separate from the artist in this case, believing that Chris Benoit's crimes, while heinous, should be considered completely distinct from his contributions as a wrestler, and that the latter should not be tarnished in any way, shape, or form by the former. However, professional wrestling is a rather unique animal when it comes to entertainment media. It is scripted just like any other TV show or movie, but much more than any other genre of entertainment, it will often receive quite a lot of ridicule for being scripted. The term fake is often used by detractors of the genre, both to refer to the fact that the action itself is fake, but also to imply that the business itself is fake, aka fraudulent, and it's not like that insult is entirely without merit. While wrestling does not pretend to be real anymore, it spent literal decades denying the truth about its nature, and insisting that the matches were not predetermined. So for many years, there was hardly any distinction between the performance and the performers. Meanwhile, whenever a wrestler has some dirty laundry happen to them in real life, it is not uncommon for that dirty laundry to itself get turned into a storyline in wrestling, a product left over from the years when wrestling pretended that it was real, and so this sort of real-life inspiration for news stories was mandatory in order to keep up that illusion. Meanwhile, Chris Benoit himself did not wrestle under a fake name. He simply wrestled as Chris Benoit. Even when wrestlers use fake names, those fake names often become synonymous with the men performing the actions. For example, nobody looks at this guy and thinks Mark Calloway. Nobody looks at this guy and thinks Terry Bollea. This is The Undertaker, and this is Hulk Hogan. The wrestlers and the people who portray the wrestlers are practically synonymous in the public eye. So while the distinction between the art and the artist is technically there in wrestling, the line is so fuzzy that I honestly cannot bring myself to separate the two. So when Chris Benoit, the man, killed his wife and son, I cannot mentally divorce his wrestling matches from what he did to his family. So now that I've laid out the 3 exceptions for when I believe the actions of the artist should influence my perception of the art, I can definitively say that Harry Potter and J.K. Rowling do not fall into any of those 3 exceptions. There are no inherently transphobic messages in the Harry Potter novels, although I'm sure some people could bend over backwards to find some if they really stretch the wording beyond recognition. There is no indication that Rowling's transphobic beliefs had directly contributed to her writing, and the novels are sufficiently distinct from the author that the two can very easily be compartmentalized away from one another. Now, if J.K. Rowling were to write an autobiography of herself, or to start doing a vlog on YouTube, that would be something where the art and the artist were too closely connected with each other for me to be able to separate the two. Because of all this, I will continue to do the Harry Potter retrospective, if for no other reason than to have some content for my channel while you guys wait for my next video game retrospective video. I also have another video in the works where I plan to address Rowling's transphobic comments in more detail, so if you're interested in hearing my thoughts on that, stay tuned for that. In the meantime, however, I am Acer Thorn, and I will see you guys later.